Cox. Yeah, he's been waiting in the wings here, and he should be coming on fairly shortly here. Sorry, Mr. Cox. So we have a lot of questions this week, and we may have to cut them a little short. As you can see, it depends on how long he has areas. Mr. Cox, wow, that no beard, the hair looks good. Boy, is he ready to go.
Greetings and salutations. Delighted to be on yet again. Wow, I was listening to the EOS New York guys. Wow.
Yeah.
Such good stuff.
Yeah, they're always providing a lot for the community. It's cool. They're bringing in economists. I think it's about time we're bringing some expert help in the economics area. So sounds good to me, right?
You're here.
So let's jump right into it. The questions. We have a long list this week. Let's go ahead and see what we have.
Absolutely. Before you get the first question up, I will do my ritual disclaimer. I will hopefully do it at the end as well. My name's Thomas Cox. I am a blockchain governance expert, and I'm very active in the EOS.io ecosystem, and I am not speaking for anyone but myself. All my answers are just my opinion or my belief from being active in the community. I'm not a spokesperson for any company of any kind. So I will do my best to give accurate answers, and I can't promise or warranty that I'm right on any of them. Doing my best here. So that's my disclaimer. Go.
All right. First question. Let's do it here. Gerard from EOS Go chat. He's talking about DAC tokens being securities, and if that DAC would indeed be considered a security, if it's considered a security, say somewhere in the U.S., could that potentially be dangerous for the entire EOS chain in that area or country?
Right. So Gerard, great question. Thank you for that. So what he's talking about is there are a number of people who are wanting to create decentralized autonomous collectives or corporations, DAOs, if you will, DACs. And one of the ways they're doing that is creating some sort of entity where there will be tokens that'll be good for voting on the direction of the organization as a whole. And they're planning to airdrop a bunch of the tokens, maybe even a controlling stake. It's not clear. It depends on which group it is, onto EOS accounts. So that if you and I had EOS accounts, then we would get some of their tokens and we would be shareholders, sort of. And the more you make a token connected, my understanding is, and I'm an amateur, I am not a securities lawyer, but I've been trying to understand this. And my best understanding so far is if the holder of one of these, DAC tokens is entitled to something and somebody else owes him something like a fiduciary duty or owes him decision rights or owes him dividends or any sort of you've made this expectation that, hey, in exchange for this token, even if I give it to you for free, you have somebody else is now obligated to you. That's a lot like a security, like indistinguishable, probably, maybe. Please talk to a lawyer, a good one. And now, then the question is, if people do that on top of EOS, does that make EOS a security? And again, not a lawyer. My best guess is no. That you can have all sorts of things built on top of EOS that don't make EOS into something it isn't. And all efforts are being made to make sure that EOS tokens are not securities. You'll notice if you ever go and read the purchase, we don't talk about the ICO, but if you go to the purchase page for EOS tokens or today as ERC20 tokens, it's like, these tokens aren't actually good for anything. You're not entitled to anything. There's no obligation on anybody's part to do anything in exchange for you, to you, with you. So it's like, how clearly can that be made into not a security? And again, big design consideration on the governance side, and just the whole design of the platform is to make sure the EOS token cannot ever be considered a security. So that's the current thinking as of today, the 9th of April.
Let's move on. We have a question from Alexandra Bourget from EOS Canada. I'd love to have more technical details about the implementation of arbitration as well as Ricardian contract integration. Are those going to be other system contracts deployed that we'll use? It was my understanding that people would sign the Ricardian contracts when using a WASM contract, but that doesn't seem implemented as of now.
Right. So, by the way, big shout out to Alexander Bourget, who's doing amazing work, along with several other folks on the EOS BIOS boot process. Just tremendous work that he's doing. He's such a contribution to the community. We're so glad he's involved. And I, too, would like more technical details about the implementation of arbitration because we're building that right now. So I can't give more details than are currently in my head. But I will say, yes, there will be arbitration contracts, such that if you were being named as a respondent in arbitration, there'd be a place you could go to look. And will there be, let's see, Ricardian contract integration. So this is actually really interesting, and we're just starting to roll that out. It's not in the 3.0 distribution fully yet, I don't think. Maybe coming shortly. It might have made it in, actually. And it goes like this. If you take a system contract like transfer, where you transfer EOS tokens from one person to another, or transfer anything from one person to another, the code asks you to say who it's from, who it's to, how many, and some little memo where you like have some words in there about, like on a check where you have like, why am I writing this check? To remind yourself why you're doing it. Well, so it's asking for these 4 things, but it's totally mechanistic. There's no statement of the intention of you or the recipient or anybody in making a function call like that. But the Ricardian contract is actually what's binding you. And there's a Ricardian contract for the transfer function. I know that because I'm writing it right now. And it says, I from, because you're the from person probably, intend to send amount to, and I stipulate that I own these tokens or I'm entitled to send them, and that I think we're saying that we require you to know who you're sending things to. So you'll have to stipulate that you know who the recipient is, and that I'm not facilitating fraud, and maybe 2 or 3 other things. And when you look at we're building the Ricardian contract as a text file with 2 curly brackets around those parameter fields, so that it's very easy for a web designer to pull that up and use what's called like the mustache or the handlebars standard to show that to you and highlight that field and show you that your name is going to go here, the recipient's name is going to go here, and here's the English text you're agreeing to when you transfer. And so it's not being done on the chain because the chain doesn't have a display function. It's going to be done in the web browser, assuming you implement it correctly. And our current plan is to release a standard implementation that people can copy and borrow from and so forth. So that's the thinking, is that every system contract will have a system Ricardian contract matching 1-to-1, parameter for parameter. And you'll see the Ricardian contract when you try to invoke the system command in a browser. And you should do the same thing as a web developer or as a dApp developer. Anything you say, like, I want to move my pawn to, Queen's Bishop 3 in the chess game, there might be something in there about, and I'm not cheating, or, and I'm not running an AI to help me. I don't know what the heck they would say, but they'd say something. If you were buying or selling something, you might have a stipulation, and I actually have the title to the stuff that I'm selling, and it's not stolen goods. All the things that you don't say in code, you can say in the Ricardian contract, which means it's like, well, that doesn't stop a bad person. Yes, but they just signed it, which means if they're lying, you can go after them through arbitration, which goes to the other half of his question, how's arbitration going to work? And I actually just did a video this morning, and I'm doing another one in 2.5 hours, doing an arbitration orientation. And those will both be recorded, and the better of the 2 recordings will be posted online. So you can go look at that to learn more, because we will eat up all the time trying to talk about the mechanics of arbitration here. And thank you, Alexander, for the question and for your work. Awesome. He's an awesome guy. Okay, next.
Nice. Yeah, let's go to Roger Davies. This is from EOS Nottingham. He talks about automatic. He's got 4 questions. We'll do a couple. Automatic scope detection, where it says the block producers are responsible for determining which data ranges are accessed and to deconflict them. What does that mean, and what will it require?
Right. So I don't know the details of that because that's not my area. What I do know is that block producers are responsible for ordering the transactions, because when you're a block producer, there's this mempool of shared transactions that all the block producers share with each other. When you get a new transaction in, you share it with everybody else so everyone can see all the transactions. And when it's your turn to make a block, you grab a bunch of them out of the mempool and you order them in some sequence, right? And the ordering is up to you. And that's referencing that fact that you as block producer can order them in a way that minimizes, reduces, or eliminates certain kinds of conflicts, the details of which I barely comprehend. In fact, maybe I don't even comprehend them at all. But that's the point, is there's something in there about the ordering and the sequencing of transactions. And I would actually ask Bart in the developer channel more on that. He or Matt or one of the other developers could totally answer that off the top of their head. So that's what that means.
Nice. Yeah. Let's see what the next question for him. He's talking about what does it mean to launch a BP where it says, we strongly encourage BPs at ESIO based. Oh, okay. So let's go on to this one. So if someone casts their votes and then 3 days later votes for another block producer, and say this action causes the block producer to drop from position 21 to 23, how will that process be handled?
Right. So how do people get in or out of the circulation? So every round is made up of a known set of producers, and then those producers decide amongst themselves what their own sequence will be to minimize latency. So they have to chat with each other to set up their ordering and agree on it. And then they publish the order. And then if you miss your spot, you've missed your block. And we're always checking the total votes every time we make a new round, because every round might be new producers. And you need to know in advance, okay, so next round, who's producing next round? And so in this round, we're checking probably a few seconds into the current round, you'll go and you'll check all the votes. And by the time you get to finality on the current block, it's clear who the current 21 are for next block. And then they'll chat amongst themselves and set up their order. And it might be the same ones, right? But if one of them changes, if number 21 drops to 23, clearly somebody else got moved up to 21. And so the set of block producers would have changed, which shows up in the vote total, which is done every 126 seconds. It used to be every 63, but it's now 12 half-second blocks per producer times 21 producers. So it's a 6-second turn where you make 12 blocks, then the next block producer does 12 blocks, and the next one, and so on. And so 6 seconds times 21 producers is 126 seconds, or 2 minutes and 6 seconds. So every 2 minutes and 6 seconds, the block producer lineup could change. And if the vote totals change, then that's what happens.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. We'll go on to Mayada Jeffrey. He's from the forums, and he's talking about, we're running short on time to order equipment, and when can we expect recommended EOS block producer hardware recommendations from Block.one?
Right. That was brilliantly answered on the prior segment by EOS New York, who were we had 73 block producing folks, individuals from various block producers, working on a cost model that Dan Larimer asked for, that I passed that on to the Block Pros channel. And in about 4 days, they just swarmed it. They did amazing work and came up with a very detailed cost model for what we think an average, quote unquote, block producer would probably maybe need, based on the fact that we don't really know how popular we're going to be, or how many users there'll be, or what applications will get distributed, or anything like that. So it really is a best guess, and it's what there is. So I would say totally go check that out, and then do your own napkin math and make some guesses and move forward.
Okay, let's move on to Samu Paha from the forums. Would it be possible to let users decide themselves how long the lockup time will be?
Right, that's the lockup time for tokens to do things like vote and to be reserved for bandwidth and CPU. And the short answer is the users themselves can amend the Constitution and the code and the default settings at any time via referendum, and the majority will rule, probably a supermajority, I suspect. And if people really would like to change the lockup time, they absolutely can. That is configurable. And his next question was, can we incentivize longer lockup times by giving more voting power? Again, that's just writing new algorithms for the voting math, which is implemented. I believe that part is also part of the large section of functionality that's implemented as WebAssembly, which means it is fully upgradable without a hard fork. So yes, absolutely, through an amendment process, you could change it, either or both of those things.
I would also think that having a dynamic lockup time is not going to be good for token mechanics and economics as well.
Oh, I have no opinion one way or the other on the economics of it. But if the question is, can we do it? Oh, you totally can do it. You could make the lockup 10 years. I'm not recommending that, but I'm saying you could do it because it's configurable.
Makes sense. Yeah. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
So it says here, according to Sandwich, apparently something like 45 to 70% of tokens are currently held on exchanges. If it says that at the same level after the blockchain is launched, exchanges could use those tokens of their customers to vote. This can easily be prevented by having longer lockup times because exchanges need liquid tokens.
Right. So to understand that, you need to know how token ownership is reflected on the blockchain versus in exchanges. So let's say, exchange Foobase has, 100,000 EOS tokens that are actually technically owned by their members or by their customers. But when they got transferred into the exchange over on the blockchain, it just shows that the exchange is the owner of record from the blockchain's perspective. And then there's an internal ledger inside Foobase where they track like which of their customers owns those individual tokens. And that's why they're able to do exchanges between their tokens very quickly, because they're just changing their own ledger. They're not changing blockchain ledgers. And they're often dealing with very slow ledgers like, Ethereum and Bitcoin. I don't know whether or not you'll find exchanges running directly on the EOS blockchain. That'll be much faster, but they'll probably still do that internal ledger thing. It has its advantages. I suspect strongly that we are going to make a constitutional provision that when you cast a vote, you are stipulating that you are the actual owner and not just the custodian of the shares or the tokens you're voting. Exchanges are custodians, right? If you bought them and they're holding them for you, they don't own them from a legal perspective. And that's where we're going to say in the vote contract. So if an exchange started voting their customers' tokens, that would be a violation of our rules. Now, it's been done. There've been exchanges out there that have voted their customers' tokens in order to control the rule sets on certain blockchains, or so I've been told. And I think it's important that if you are a custodian and you cast a vote, that you got to be able to prove that you got a proxy or a proxy equivalent from somebody and they instructed you how they'd like their tokens voted. So good luck with that.
I also have to say how much. Oh, go ahead.
It might be much better to just like not vote other people's tokens when they have done you the courtesy of letting you hold them for them.
That's how you see an exchange collapse, by trying to vote with EOS tokens and then losing those tokens. That could be a problem. Yeah,
it would be, the actual owners would get them back because we're the rule of law chain, but it could be, it would be awkward.
Yeah,
It would be awkward. I think if we make it clear what the rules are in advance, then people will behave properly.
We have to make sure we say congratulations on Foobase. That's a great name. I also, Vinny the Vapid Voter and Carl the corrupt BP candidate. You're good at naming these things there, Thomas.
I'm going to write children's stories in my spare time.
Let's go on to
Aaron. That's a reference to an article I wrote on Medium, by the way, if you haven't read that.
Yeah, he wrote a great article about arbitration story about blockchain vote buying and corruption by Thomas Cox. It is a great article.
Why it's wrong and how it would get crushed like a bug by the arbitration process.
Nice.
So don't even bother, because you'll get caught and you'll get punished.
Perfect. Answer a lot of questions. Aaron Schneider asked a great question in private message. I had never even thought about this before, but he's asking if voter turnout is largely expected to be community driven, will any incentivization models at the DApp level be permissible?
That's a great question. I'm curious. You would have to make sure that your incentivization wasn't for voting in a particular way, but just voting in general. And I'm not sure what you could afford to give away to 1 billion tokens that wouldn't bankrupt you. And having said that, I've, in my spare idle moments thought that you should, have like $1 off admission at certain places if you're like an organ donor or something. So when people voluntarily do good things, I think other folks should just sort of recognize that and do them nice little turns in exchange. You would have to be careful how you incentivized. You would have to be sure not to incentivize specific kinds of voting. Like, oh, you voted for the right guy, here's an incentive. You just paid for a vote. But hey, you cast your votes. Yay, you get special access, like little gold VIP icon next to your name on the forum that we run. That's like totally, I can't see how that would be a problem. So we'll see. It'd be case by case. You just need to be careful and read the text of the Constitution once we release it.
Yeah, his question kind of reminded me of the whole turbo tokens idea that Ava put out a while back.
Yeah, how to find ways to give DApp providers some sort of franchise, some sort of control, and also developers generally. So there's a lot of thoughts and questions going on, and we have not, of course, released the governance roadmap where any future plans on that would be disclosed. So it really still is just one token, one vote for now.
Sounds good. Let's see here. Go ahead, Bluejays.
Yeah, so it says here, and this is from Aaron Schneider as well, would it be possible for a small nested group with its own constitution to impose a mandatory block producer voting rule at the EOS.io level on its members?
I love that question. I got to say, and I want to say, by the way, Mayada Jeffrey, Samapaha, thank you for your questions. And you also, Aaron Schneider. And I thought about that. I'm like, would that be okay? It's like, on the one hand, I wouldn't necessarily want to belong to an organization like that, but we are seriously about freedom and the free association. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could set up a community where it was mandatory to get face tattoos. Okay. You could do that. I wouldn't join, but you could do it. As long as you didn't coerce people, as long as it was voluntary, you could totally do that.
Unless it looked like a goatee, maybe.
Yeah. We'll get the goatee tattoo. Yeah. That sounds tacky. So could you have a mandatory block producer voting rule in your nested group? I can't see why not. As long as you're not paying people to vote in a particular way. You know, if you vote for A over B, then you get some benefit. And if you vote for B over A, you don't get that benefit. Now that's paying for a vote. But just like, we're the club of people who vote. And to belong, you have to vote. And it's like your membership gets revoked if you stop voting. It's like, okay, you know, just don't do the face tattoo thing. All right. Just don't take my examples to heart, please.
Don't be Mike Tyson.
Don't be. No face tattoos.
No.
Unless you like them. Okay. If that's your thing, I'd say go for it. Because there's some amazing face tattoos out there. I've seen some that I'm thinking, damn, if I looked as good as that, I would get that face tattoo also. What? But I don't. The Maori, oh my, they are badass. They are hardcore. There's some face tattoos out there that are amazing. All right. Just going to go on the record and say, I admire it from a distance. I'll never get one.
Are those the ones that they do with the sticks and they kind of...
I think so.
Yeah.
We're so off topic now, but this is an interesting discussion. Yeah, I should stop it with the examples. I really should.
If Thomas Cox shows up at your meetup with a face tattoo, you'll know what happened.
You know, I lost a bet of some magnitude.
You see that other question by Aaron Schneider? This is a good one too. Do you ever see the need for being a need for BPs to voluntarily commit to some kind of annual audit or review of financial statements?
That's a really interesting question. My best guess is it'll be a little bit like we saw in the U.S. presidential campaigns. Prior to Richard Nixon, nobody who was a candidate for president ever released their personal financial records. It just wasn't a thing. And then there was some scandal about whether or not Nixon had received some bribe or something. Someone gave him a dog for his kid. It was like, oh my God, he's going to change foreign policy because he got a dog, right? And he gave his famous checkers speech, apparently, which I never saw, but I heard about, and he released all of his financials. And then it became this standard thing that all presidential candidates released all their financial records all the time because nobody wanted to be the one who didn't. So that's the kind of level where that might operate, where it might become something that voters are asking for, or that voting rating groups and agencies might be voting. I don't know. I don't think you'll see it at the base code level as a requirement, but it could easily be something that's just like there's this groundswell of everyone expects it, and then you don't get voted for if you don't. Maybe, who knows? That's the most likely.
Another BP question: what happens if the 121 block producer number is not met? Are all candidates automatically voted in?
Probably yes. And I promise you, I'm gonna find a Mac Mini and plug it in, and I'll be 121. I'm not really gonna do that.
Might as well. Yeah, you can fit it in that file cabinet back there.
It's a conflict of interest for me. I can't do that.
Oh well.
I'd think about it, but I couldn't do it.
I think we know someone else with Mac Minis who might be interested in that as well.
Yeah, Ian, we're talking about you.
There you go. Ross Go from the forums, he's asking about names on EOS.io. He has 3 different questions about them, but basically, how will the naming work when launched, and do all accounts have to be created by the EOS.io account name?
At one point, the rule was that any account can make another account, and I don't know if we've changed that or not. I don't think I'm 99% sure that the EOS.io account, which is the account that's used to create the chain at BIOS boot, actually gets disabled soon after and never logs in again and never does anything. So it would either be block producers, or it would just be somebody with an existing account who's willing to give you create an account and give you the control of it because you asked for it. Account creation occurs by the create account command, where you pass in 2 public keys. So you can have somebody else do it for you. You hold back your private keys, give them your public keys, and say, here, make me an account. Here's $1, or here's a smile. I don't know, whatever they want. So it won't be the EOS.io account doing all the creation. It might be semi-centralized in block producers. It might be totally decentralized and anybody can do it. I'm not sure right now. I think that might be in flux. It's been a while since I was in that conversation.
And following up to that, what is done to prevent name squatting?
Nothing.
Huh, okay.
And if you use somebody else's name to defraud anybody, you've just committed a crime and you're liable for sanctions.
I think, yeah, actually Dan said something about that the other day too.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Cool. And let's talk, he also asked about whether 13 characters is enough for account names.
Well, as long as you don't mind if it's a string of letters and numbers that aren't too close to your name. I did the math on that, and the possible combinations exceed like 10 to the 18th power of possible name combinations, which is like enough for every man, woman, and child on the planet to have like 1 billion names each. So I don't think it's a problem.
Human population has a long way to go before we have an issue there.
It's like every device in my house could be independently named, and I'd be, names to spare.
And the Awakenment from the forums, he's asking about how does Block.one plan on creating and allocating its 10% stake?
Right. Basically, we're going to create an account with a lockup in it, and it will be issued its tokens at startup. And it just sits there and it unlocks 10% per year. I think it's on either an annual or a monthly basis, most likely, is how those will unlock just slowly over time. And the whole backstory on that's in the original white paper, if you want to look at that.
And this is the question I think has been asked before, but will those 10% be a voting block all at once, or will it be released 10% at a time?
Right. So here's this account with 100 million EOS tokens in it on day one. Will they all be available to be voted? None, some, just the ones released? And the answer is they will all be available to be voted. Dan said that in chat a couple times ago, like a week ago, and he told me that as well when I asked him directly. So yes, the current plan is that Block.one will have a not insignificant number of tokens that can vote if it chooses to do so, which I'm sure it very well may. Somebody asked him how they would be voted, and he said something to the effect of, in our best interest, which is typical cryptic Dan.
As Eric Hoel called it, the executive branch in action there.
Indeed.
Yeah. David F. from the forums, he's asking about, I understand that anything in EOS is subject to arbitration. And how about fungibility? Does this mean that we have to look at who is giving the EOS and make sure they received it without stealing or selling goods that were not legal?
Yes, just as you have to do in the real world.
Yeah.
If you buy a pair of extremely cheap stereo speakers out of somebody's trunk in a parking lot somewhere, and then you discover they were stolen and they're taken from you, that's the same thing that can happen on the blockchain, guys. Don't be buying stuff that you aren't confident is being sold to you in good faith by somebody who has title to them. So someone with no reputation and no performance bond and isn't part of a mutual aid society or a merchant's guild and can't prove to you simple things like, so how do you own this? Dude, stop it. Don't buy shady things. Or do and get them confiscated.
It sounds like more and more the watchdog job will be a popular one, or possibly a lucrative one on the blockchain. It's just unwinding all these transactions.
Yeah, well, finder fees. It's like, oh, like I found some stolen, whatever the virtual equivalent of stereo speakers are.
Yeah. And then let's see. So how does the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation proposed by the European Commission, how does that affect EOS? Is there anything that needs to be done before launching EOS?
Yeah, super question. Really good question. Because the GDPR includes a number of provisions on protecting customer data, one of which is a requirement that customer data must be able to be deleted, which on a blockchain is impossible. And so it's not just EOS, it's every blockchain has to go, what do we do with that? And the short answer is I've read as many articles as I can find that include GDPR and blockchain. And all the articles I've found so far say, yeah, that's a real problem. And they don't have good answers. However, there's an organization, just as one example, called EOS that is going to be deploying, they said on the EOS blockchain, they are a medical records organization. And that's like, wow, that's incredibly sensitive. You're going to stick that on a blockchain where everyone can see it? Oh my God. And they say they're going to use zero knowledge proofs and encryption and 3 or 4 other elements to provide the security and the safety and the protection that are necessary. And I think their design is going to be the kind of thing I would be looking at if I were holding client commercial information. I'd probably hold it off chain for the most part, frankly. And I would have to look very closely at how I would comply with GDPR. Because if you're on the internet, you're everywhere. And if you're on a blockchain, you're global. And GDPR is probably going to apply to you. In fact, I'm pretty confident it will. So I think the dApp developers really need to be looking at that. And that's not an EOS thing. That's a blockchain thing. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to know.
Yeah, makes sense.
If I could tell you how, I would totally tell you how at this very moment. I just don't know.
At least we can say that there will have to be some kind of technical controls on a regulation level for that thing to...
I think someone's going to come up with a reference implementation that addresses a lot of it, and we're all going to go, oh, thank you, and then, emulate them or copy them in some way.
We have one question on the chat here. First off, Joseph Hitt says, thanks for coming on, and thanks for going to Atlanta as well. Does inter-blockchain communication also imply atomic swaps?
Yeah, we are definitely at the outer edges of my knowledge, my technical knowledge, and my remit. Inter-blockchain communication is not something where I'm comfortable giving firm answers. I would say that there's some good information in the dev chat that the core developers who are working on inter-blockchain communication could answer. But I can't do it with any confidence. I know a lot. I don't know that.
Thomas, I have a question here. So we know that you've been going to all these meetups all over the place. Are you in a plane right now and just disguising it as your office?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm doing my best not to travel on Mondays so that I can continue to do the QA.
Oh, thank you.
I will say I'm expecting to be on a video attendance at the Moscow meetup on April 11th. And I've got Charlotte, North Carolina, tentatively on the 29th. And I'll be physically in Salt Lake City on, I think it's I shouldn't have to think. I can go look it up. Just a second if you're curious. By the way, there's going to be some really cool governance tour T-shirts being made. EOS Atlanta has committed to making some, and their design is available for other meetups. So whether you're having me or not, but certainly if you're having me in as a guest, I think it would be awfully cool to have EOS governance tour T-shirts for limited edition for folks. And if they're there when I get there, I will totally sign them. April 17th, Salt Lake City. April 18th, Dallas, Texas. April 19th, Austin, Texas. And April 20th, Blacksburg, Tennessee. And
there's a Blacksburg in Tennessee as well.
I'm sorry, did I say Tennessee? I keep saying it. Blacksburg, Virginia. Okay. There's a Blacksburg in like 4 or 5 states, actually. No, Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My mind is drifting.
Yeah, that's what we noticed. Well, last week after you leave, we always do our news and meetups segment, and that's when we first realized that every single one, Thomas Cox. I
want to thank Atlanta, by the way, for giving me a chance to sort of give the inaugural governance talk using just, again, it's like my own presentation, it's my own slides, and awesome questions. There was a fellow there, Michael, I think it was. Yeah, Michael from the local Bitcoin group, he's not an EOS fan, but he's a blockchain fan. He had some really tough questions. He grilled me like a fish, and it was awesome.
Was he happy at the end with your answer?
He said he was, okay. And I felt like I did the best job possible answering his questions, and they were all very legitimate questions. So I got to say, I love it when someone who is committed and skeptical, wants and asks for and even demands the answers that they need for them to be comfortable with whatever it is they're going to do.
That's right. We don't want to be an echo chamber. So
yeah, we want skepticism and variety and challenge, because we're not trying to make a bubble. We're trying to make software. Yeah. So the more skeptical and difficult you are now, the better the software will be. Yeah. And the better the governance will be. So,
and speaking of which, that's why we hold these Q&A sessions, right? And it's open for everybody. So please submit your questions, and Thomas will answer them as best as he could.
Totally.
Yep. And pretty much the whole world will have governance T-shirts from Atlanta by the time.
Or other places, because you can have a different. I think it was Steve Floyd from EOS Atlanta did the designs, and he did designs for like every city that asked for one. So there's like, and they're really beautiful too. There's this huge chestahedron. It's transparent, and through it you can see a skyline of whichever city it is. It says EOS, PDX for Portland, or EOS ATL for Atlanta. Wow. They're lovely, and I think could make a very cool limited edition collector's item, and I'm planning to get one of each.
Wow.
So I will never have to go for T-shirts again for many years. I'll have like 20 shirts.
Wow.
But since they're limited edition, they'll more likely be hung up behind you in the office there, probably framed.
Yes, I'll put them up as trophies.
Yeah, figured. Well, thank you as always, Thomas. Sorry we had to bring you on a little bit late. But
oh, not at all. The EOS New York segment was fabulous.
Yeah, they always bring a lot. And yeah, thanks for coming on. We'll compile more questions for next week. Is there anything people should know about you before you go? Any questions that you're...
I've had some people ask me if I would just record a quick video hello for their meetup or for their group. And if I'm going to do it for anyone, I should do it for everyone. So yes, if you would like, email me or telegram me and say, I would like a video hello from you. I'll record it right here in this office, unless I'm somewhere else, and then I'll record it wherever I'm at. And I'll say hello to your group. And welcome you to the EOS community, and say thank you for being a member, because I'm really glad you're here, because we need everybody. We need everybody's help. In fact, I'll tell you what crossed my mind. Can I just read this?
Sure.
For this, I think this is important. I think it's tremendously important that all the different groups that are forming self-organize and start to create the foundations for our community. Create meetups, create block producers, create dApps, create arbitration panels, and on and on. And I'm just speaking as a fellow member of this exciting community of people who are all around the world, who are so excited by the potential of decentralized applications and decentralized ledger technology. And we can see the potential it has to maybe change the world. And for that to succeed, we're going to have to do a couple of things. I believe we're going to have to get to know each other as human beings. We're going to have to extend each other the benefit of the doubt, while also being skeptical and demanding trustworthiness and accountability, and offering trustworthiness and accountability. I think we're going to have to communicate very carefully and thoroughly and clearly. And we're going to have to ask each other for help, and give that help and volunteer and give freely to the community from whatever your strength may be. If you're a designer, if you're a thought leader, if you're an analyst, if you're somebody who's just good talking to groups, whatever your skill is, somebody needs that. And we need you. And in the weeks and the months and the years ahead, I'm going to be calling on people all throughout the community for help on whatever project I'm working on. And I want you to ask me for help as well. So welcome to the greater EOS community. I'm looking forward to seeing you around.
Wow, that was amazing.
That was awesome. That was great.
Thanks, Thomas.
Every word is true.
We're proud to have you as part of this community as well.
I tell you, this would not, I don't think the community would exist in its current form without the work of EOS Go.
No, thank you. Well, and of course, part of it is thanks to you as well, Thomas, because you've been.
I do my best, but of course, there would have been no one for me to help if you hadn't said, I want help.
Well, we always appreciate it. Yeah.
Any day, my friend, any day. See you in a week.
See you in a week, sir.
Thomas.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Good night.
Bye.